أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردن الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلك منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا شريك لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم ما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمره نكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أن خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مهضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أن خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقا قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن تزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرة ولا لقبائحي ساترة ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفتحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي خيرك، أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهواه وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا تفزع نتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في ساعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي. هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي، يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، وعلى أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين؟ يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها ضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآمنين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وهبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج المؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تشجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين يقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وكان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك، أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا، وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذي وكلتهم بحفظه ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلته أو بر تنشره أو رزق تبسطه أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أصرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك ذنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد ومن كادني فكيد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهيجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابق النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل به ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا ولي الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. هيا على السلام هيا على السلام هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Respected scholar, my elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen and Kul Marhamin Al-Fatiha. Ayama Yajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد والصلاة والسلام التحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So before we begin, as you can see, there's a survey that's active right now. It's good for us to get some feedback once in a while. It helps us tailor the programs. So if you could log in and do that, the poll should be kept active if I'm not mistaken. And then maybe since there's nobody logged in voting right now, then maybe we'll continue this next week or leave it open at that time, inshallah. But we will have time for Q&A later, as usual, on Slido if you have questions regarding any of the previous lectures. And then, of course, we have our quiz setup for tonight as well. So far, we've taken a trip back in time through history. We've tried to look at exactly what has happened specifically in Europe from the dark Middle Ages through the scientific revolution, through the Enlightenment, through the Industrial Revolution, up until last time where we hit the modern age. Where are we right now? And we saw how people basically went from religion being the main go-to device to figure out what is right and wrong, to figure out what is true and false. Religion goes from that, and then slowly but surely it moves away, and people begin to try to find replacements for parts of the religion, and sometimes even the whole thing. In the modern age, as we started talking about last week, we saw that the academics, the thinkers, the philosophers, the politicians, the main idea there was religion now has become meaningless. Why? Because we have science, we have the scientific method, we have the empirical sciences, the natural sciences, and we don't need anything else. Some went beyond that and said that religion is actually the enemy of humanity. Religion is destroying humanity. It's causing wars. It's causing destruction. It causes hate. It causes violence. It causes discrimination. It causes racism, etc. And you can see this is the age pretty much that most of us are living in. An age where we're trying to stay afloat and defend ourselves against those who say religion is the deadliest idea and ideology out there right now. And you see how many of us have tried to combat that idea through different means. Religious people with good intentions decided that maybe we should just use their language, meaning let's use scientific language. So they try to force feed scientific theories into the Quran, into the Hadith, with disastrous results, as we talked about last time. Or when someone wants to explain the wisdom, reasoning, or philosophy of an Islamic idea or a Islamic rule, they do it through physical and empirical evidences and studies. So if they want to discuss the idea of fasting, then they'll talk about only or mainly, oh, look at the benefits on the body. Look at the studies done about the benefits of fasting. Completely disregarding the things that we have in the Quran, in the Hadith, that we can discuss from a metaphysical, immaterial, mystical perspective. So this is something that we have to be very, very careful of. Now, the second half of the modern age, which is what we want to discuss today, is where the modernists basically started to recognize and realize, hey, I think we made a mistake. I think all of this reliance on science maybe wasn't such a good idea. Maybe science isn't all that it's cracked up to be. So the two things that we'll talk about tonight, inshallah. The first is what are the why was the banner in my beard? Gotta get that banner out of my beard, sorry. Why are the, what are the limitations of science? Right? And the second is once you realize the limitations, the shortcomings, and the problems within the scientific method and the empirical method, then we see that there's two trends that have resulted from that. There's two different ways that people splintered off and decided to make up for that scientific shortcoming. So that's what we hope to discuss tonight. If you can send as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, tonight basically, we're talking about the modern problem, right? So it's the problems of the modern age. So, all of these great thinkers, these philosophers, these theorists, they were doing so well with their pure reason, their pure science, for a while. But then some of them started to think a little bit deeper, and they realized that there was some problems in just relying on science and not turning to religion, not turning to philosophy, not turning to metaphysics. Well, one of the ways they figured it out was that they said, you know what? We have some needs as human beings, and it doesn't seem like science is helping out with that. So that's why you'll see, even among many scientific papers to this day, you'll see, they say, well, it seems like humans need religion. We need something to believe in that is non-scientific. Not that it's unscientific, but non-scientific, meaning it's something other than science. The physical scientific stuff is good, but it can't be all that we have. So we as individual human beings need it, and as a society, in order to function, we need it. And why is that the case? It's because part of it is because of the limitations of science. Now, I want to make one clarification here, because I think some people may be confused. And you might be thinking, Hasan, for so long, for months, you've been going on, and it's like hating on science and insulting it. Why are you so against science? Well, remember, we are not against science. We have no problem with the scientific method. See, there's a difference between someone being scientific and somebody being scientistic, right? There's scientific and scientistic, two different things. Scientific is what some of us think we do, which is just using a certain method of looking at the world to determine maybe a pattern and predict the future, maybe, right? To examine certain things using the empirical method. Hopefully something you can examine in a lab. That's scientific. That's the scientific method. Now, there's scientistic or being scientistic, or it goes back to the idea of being a follower of a ideology, a philosophy called scientism. So scientism is the belief that the only way we can understand reality is through science. If something is going to be true, then science will tell us. If science can't talk about it, then that means it's not real, it's not true. So it's no wonder that so many atheists who are scientistic, meaning the only thing they care about is science, it's no reason they're atheists. Why? Because they say, okay, the question is, does God exist or not? Well, God is, based on what the Abrahamic faith individuals say, they say that God is immaterial. God is not made up of matter. Well, guess what? Scientistic views and scientism says the only thing that exists is physical stuff, matter, what you can actually touch, what you can measure in a lab. So since we scientists can't measure God in a lab, he therefore doesn't exist. That's the conclusion they're going to reach. And if you limit your scope to just being the physical material world, then of course there's not going to be God. There won't be any angels. There won't be a shaitan. There won't be a soul. There won't be a conscience. There won't be anything like that because science can't and doesn't care about measuring things like that. So we need to be careful because the discussion about science today is mostly done by those who believe science is the only thing that's valuable in life. So we need to make sure that when we understand science, we put it in its rightful place. That's the idea. So, of course, religion is not against science. That doesn't make any sense. They're not opposing. But science is so much more lower than other types of ways of understanding reality, right? It's one of the lower ways. Mathematics is another way of understanding the world. Logic and reasoning is another way of understanding the world. And philosophy is another way of understanding the world, as is revelation or religion. So there's multiple different ways, and we shouldn't get sucked into the propaganda from those who are atheists, those who are modernists, and who say the only thing that matters is matter, pun intended. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now, what exactly makes science so limited? Why is it that they were saying, even some of these modernist scholars, why are they saying that humans need religion? Humans need something beyond the physical. Why? So this is where we come to the limitations of science. There are certain ideas that science can never and will never address. And in fact, if we go forward, if science tries to deal with it, it creates more problems. So let's go through the examples. So the first thing is about the real deep philosophical questions that you and I have. Where do we come from? Where do we go? What do we do while we're here? How do we become better people? Science doesn't care about any of that. Science doesn't measure morality. You can't take being good and pour it into a beaker and then measure that. There's no scientific way of telling what is good, what is evil, what is bad, what is better, what is worse. Science doesn't have those sort of discussions. That's for philosophy, right? To talk about ethics and morality. In the same light, if we want to talk about why are we here on this earth? Why were human beings created? Well, now scientists might talk about, okay, we're, DNA and RNA and the fundamental building blocks of life, of human life, and what makes up the brain. And okay, they can talk about maybe all the physical stuff, fine. But does that tell us why we are actually here? No, they can't answer the ultimate why questions. Those things which have been plaguing mankind since the beginning, since we've been here. Science has nothing to do with those questions. But they are something that always every human being wants to answer. Even an atheist wants to find an answer. They want to know, what is the purpose of life? If you take a strict scientific method, do you know the answer? The only answer that a strict scientist, an atheistic scientist, a materialistic person, a physicalist, a naturalist, someone who limits their worldview to just what science says, their answer is going to be that there is no purpose in life. Everything just randomly happened. It randomly popped into existence. Cause and effect, atoms affect atoms and molecules and particles, blah, 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 all that stuff. There's no reason. There was nobody setting these things in motion with a reason in mind. It just happened. That's it. Our life has no purpose whatsoever. That's the conclusion that they have reached, that they still reach now, and that they will continue to reach, because that's the most that they can understand using their methodology. That's it. That's a problem. Telling somebody that their life is purposeless, it's almost as if you're telling a lot of individuals who are having trouble in life, stress and depression, that, hey, there's no purpose. You're going to go into non-existence. Suicide's an option. And this is why you see many individuals who don't have a religion, a philosophy to lean on. A lot of them go towards suicide or to some sort of self-destruction. This is a natural conclusion of the scientific method, purely taking that without looking at deeper ideas. Now, that's about some of the limits. What about some of the problems? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If you stick with a strict scientific approach, then one of the most obvious intuitive ideas and notions about human beings will go down the drain. And that's the idea of free will. We talked about how earlier in the scientific revolution, in the Enlightenment, right from there, people began to question the idea of free will. Why? Because they said, we can't figure out a reason why it's here. It doesn't make sense. Now, religion can explain it. A deep metaphysical philosophy can explain it, but science can't. And in fact, if you push Newtonian physics all the way, then what you'll end up with is the claim or the conclusion that there is no such thing as free will. You and I are just a bunch of robots. Why? Because from the Big Bang, everything has just been set in motion, and it's cause and effect. That's it. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So there's no free will anymore, if you strictly take that approach. Now imagine the chaos that's going to ensue if you start telling people that, hey, stick to science. Okay. Oh, by the way, there's no free will. You're giving people a free card to go and do whatever they want. This is the dangerous thing, right? So this is one of the problems that's caused by this very limited scientific method. Now, what else? We have clearly science in its purest sense hasn't really benefited us, especially in the modern age. Now, some people might say, but look at all the technology we have. Oh, Hasan, you're speaking through, fancy new mic, and you've got the mic stand now, laptop and lights and all this stuff. It's all because of technology. That's science, isn't it? Well, yes and no. A part of it is science, sure. But why do you only think about the good when it comes to science, but think about none of the bad? Why do we not include those who use science as a means to do evil things? So, for example, look at the wars, so many wars of this past 20th century. I mean, we've only really had 2 world wars. Both of them happened during the 1900s. In the same era where people began to move away from religion. People began to abandon metaphysics. They wanted to leave and move away from God. Is that a coincidence? Doesn't seem like it. Now, some might say, oh, World War I and World War II were caused by religious people. It doesn't seem like it. All that fancy new technology, right? Being able to conduct warfare in new ways. How was that helpful? How did that progress mankind? Specifically, the best example of this is the U.S.'s dropping of 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese. This was something that was a marvel of science. Look what we've created. Wonderful. And look what you've destroyed. You've destroyed a whole civilization. And the effects of what was done in World War II are still felt today. Science can't tell you whether dropping bombs on a whole population is good or bad. That's not science's job. They can build for you the bomb. They can build nuclear weapons. They can create anthrax. They can do all of these things. And that's what they did. And they were used for these purposes. Science is not going to tell you what is ethical or not. Another problem. This was a major issue. And that's why it seems like you see so many wars, so much fighting, so many issues happening within the 20th century. Once people moved away from God, once people moved away from religion and the traditional method and metaphysics and philosophy and ethics and all of that, and they tried to figure out everything just through their rational mind and science, then you see what the results are. People are just going and they're fighting amongst themselves. They are able to rationalize whatever ideas they want because they have no religion to keep them in place. We can even take this even further to a destructive idea, which was very popular in the 19th century, or rather the 20th century, which was called scientific racism. And this is very important for, obviously, our times right now where racism is still on our minds. So what is scientific racism and what are some examples? Let's discuss that. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, Thomas Jefferson, a person that many people, those who are patriots, patriotic Americans, who love the founding fathers, those who love the idea of Jeffersonian republicanism and conservatism, they're going to quote Thomas Jefferson and talk about how great he is. Well, there's maybe a few quotes that we should look at of Jefferson that would give us pause on whether he's somebody that we should really be taking as a role model. In one of his works, Jefferson says that blacks are inferior to the whites in the endowments of body and mind. Basically, what Jefferson was saying, na'udhu billah, is that black people are inferior to white people because they're physically different and they're mentally different, meaning weaker. White people are better. That's what he was saying. This is somebody that we all love to talk about so much, but a very clear racist. Now, he didn't think that they were better because he had some spiritual problem, one could argue. He was quoting scientific evidence because they said, look, they've looked at the evidence and examined the minds and the brains of black people and their bodies, and they're weaker. And white people are better. This is at the heart of scientific racism. Using the scientific method, you come to disastrous conclusions. But because science apparently can tell us reality, people stick with that and they use that and they engage in disastrous ideas. Let's give another example. We mentioned Charles Darwin before with our idea of Darwinian evolution. Do you know that in one of his works, he has described different races, or he's divided them into two groups, civilized races and savage races. I'll let you decide who he decided to put in the savage race category. Somebody whose theory we've all studied in public school. Somebody who's clearly saying that some races are savages. Why? Because he's got scientific evidence. James Watson. He was the co-discoverer of the double helix structure of DNA. Him along with Crick, his partner Crick. Watson and Crick. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1962 for his discovery. Well, smart guy. Recently, I think it's maybe a few years ago, in an event, he made the claim that Africans are inferior and less intelligent based on scientific evidence. Same thing. He said, no, he was saying, I'm not a racist. I don't hate them. I'm not discriminating. But if you're going to ask me questions about the African race, here's the scientific evidence. Here's how their brains function. Here's how their bodies function. And guess what? They are weaker. They're more inferior. This was a Nobel Prize winner. Somebody who's, I think, still alive, if I'm not mistaken, saying that Africans are weaker. Based on what? Not quoting the Bible, not quoting the Quran, not going into narrations, using the scientific method. Here's evidence. Blacks are inferior. And then you might think, okay, look, Hasan, these are just random people's ideas. It's not like anybody would ever act on that. Well, we can go through many examples. One example, and this is for all of you to research, although some of you may have even read this in your grade school, in your studies. One of the reasons behind Hitler's Nazism and his ideas was because he was a firm believer in the scientific method. And when he saw that certain people and certain races were inferior, then he said, well, it makes sense to wipe them out, imprison them, torture them, get rid of them. So Hitler was just using science, right? His whole genocidal project was largely due in part to science. But it's not just, crazy Nazi Germany. It happened right here in the United States as well. So scientific racism was also used as a justification for something in 1921 called the Emergency Quota Act. And there's another one in 1924 called the Immigration Act, or it's also known as the Johnson-Reed Act. So over here, what do they say? These two acts imposed racial quotas limiting Italian immigration to the United States and immigration from other Southern European and Eastern European nations. And the ones who were, for these two acts, the quotas behind, certain types of immigrants coming in, do you know what their reasoning was? They said, we want to block undesirable immigrants. And they used scientific evidence saying that these people are, they're not really intelligent. They're dirty. They're dumb. Na'udhu billah. I mean, I don't know you. I'm getting a sense of deja vu here all of a sudden. I feel like I've heard somebody say this before, or I've heard people talk about this before. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe you guys can help me out. Okay. So, scientific racism. What are you supposed to do if you conduct experiments, you examine the mind, you examine the body, and the results show that certain races are inferior? Are you now going to count on science to tell you what is real? Well, that's exactly the problem of scientific racism. Now, some people today say, oh, that was bogus science. Well, what is bogus science? And this comes to our next problem of science. If you can send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We tend to use the term scientific fact, scientific evidence. And we think that when somebody comes out with a theory or fact or idea and principle in science, that's it, that's the truth. But that's clearly not the case. We know for a fact, everybody knows, that science changes. I mean, I don't even know what word to use. It doesn't just change every few years or every few centuries. It seems as though there are new ideas and findings every single day. Many of you, I'm sure, who get these like news alerts, you see that it's almost as if the same subject is being addressed and the contradictory conclusions are coming out every time. So I think the most recent example would be eggs. So one day, a study comes out that says eating more than 5 eggs a day is going to lead to cancer. Then the next day, another study comes out and says, no, eating 5 eggs a day will not lead to cancer. Okay. Then the next day, it's eating 10 eggs a day, but not cancer. It'll lead to heart problems. And then the next day, another article refutes that one. Then the next day, they say, you shouldn't be having any eggs at all. And then another article comes and says, you can live off of eggs for your whole life. Well, can you make up your mind? Can you help us out here? But the problem is that it has nothing to do with them making up their mind. This is the nature of the scientific method. You're taking a look at variables, you're doing experiments, but you can never fully get an answer. You can never be 100% sure with science, right? You can experiment 99% of things, maybe, but that can never give you 100% certainty. And that's why now quantum mechanics has thrown everything out the door. It's thrown it in the garbage. They say all the stuff about Newtonian physics, we can't use that anymore. What Einstein said, even that we have to toss down the drain. Quantum physics, quantum mechanics has completely changed the way that scientists have to view the world and their relationship with mathematical modeling, right? That's an issue for them to discuss. So why is it that people are so sure that science tells us the truth when it's clear science is not in the business of telling and giving us 100% certainty? It's guesswork. It's fancy guesswork. It's helpful. We're not denying that. But to be so faithful, in a sense, having so much blind faith is not healthy. So our humble advice to those atheists is that you accuse us theists, religious people of having blind faith. Well, we have good reasons for what we do. But you're just examining a few variables and you're trying to determine everything in the world. It's clear you can't do that. So it seems like you're the ones who are using blind faith and relying on it, not us. You see, because science doesn't work in a vacuum. Science doesn't function by itself. In order for science to work, you need deeper ideas. Math needs to function in order for science to work. Now, is math something, are numbers something you can see in the real world? Can you experiment on numbers? No. And math itself is based on logic. Is logic something that you can touch in the free world? No, you can't. Logic is also based on the idea of metaphysical and immaterial philosophical realities. So, the same scientist who's denying the fact that there's something beyond the physical world, well, guess what? If there was not something beyond the physical world, you couldn't even do your science. Science requires and needs the fact that there's cause and effect, that heat causes water to boil, that A causes this reaction to B. That's cause and effect. You can't measure cause and effect in science. Only philosophy, metaphysics does that. And the reasons for why the cause and effect is there, again, that's not for you to discuss. That's only going to be for religion, metaphysics, irfan, philosophy. That's it. So these deeper principles that science really owes a huge debt to, they are kind of biting the hand that has fed them. And this is the biggest problem with the modernist movement. So we as Muslims need to be very, very careful that we're not using the language of those who are trying to ridicule us and destroy the beautiful nature of God's religions. And that's why from this we see that there was two trends. People needed to go in two different directions after they realized that science couldn't hold its own weight. Now, what were those two trends? Inshallah, we'll talk about that next week. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If there's any questions on Slido, we'll take those. If not, we'll go on to the quiz. Okay, so let's see. So some of you have jumped into the poll. I don't know if anybody's voted yet. Doesn't seem like it. So I think maybe we'll just leave this open and people can log in and I guess maybe they can vote. Otherwise, maybe we should just jump to the quiz then. We don't want to take up too much time. Okay. Okay, so slowly everybody's popping in. So again, reminder that it's better if people log in from the beginning, right? We don't want to take up too much time. I'm waiting for people to log in, although when you do that, at least I get to say salam individually to everybody. So salam alaikum to all of you. Muzammil and Mujahid Jan Muhammad, the Jaganis, Jabir, Hermione. I'm not really into Harry Potter, so Yusuf al-Imam. Eid Mubarak. Oh yeah, it's after Maghrib, so yeah, Eid Mubarak to all of you. Inshallah becomes a night and a day for us to reflect on the idea of sacrifice, which we can talk about in our khutbah tomorrow morning, inshallah. Salam alaikum, Plato. And yeah, Plato. Who else did I miss? Qambar. Salam alaikum. Nasser. Did I miss? Oh, it keeps shifting. See, sorry, it keeps like shifting the names, like it flips them around, right? You can see it. So I'm like seeing Assalamu alaikum, Subtain, Yusuf Ali. The DUG NC. NC? What is NC? Non-combatant? Abbas, assalamu alaikum. All right, 5 seconds and then we'll get started. Assalamu alaikum. Bakri Eid. And I think I missed somebody. Sakina J. Okay. All right, let's go. Oh, and Ali, assalamu alaikum. All right, here we go. What is the connection between the word Baqarah and the title Al-Baqir? Baqarah means cow, and a baqir is somebody who provides knowledge in the same way that a cow provides milk. Or is it no, Baqarah means lion, and a baqir tears apart their enemies like a lion does its prey? Does Baqarah mean splitting open and then therefore, and revealing, and a baqir is somebody who splits open and reveals things like knowledge and information? Or it's all of the above, depending on context. So in tonight's quiz, I've got some questions from the majlis of the Shahada, the fifth Imam, alayhi salam, and then I think maybe 1 or 2 questions maybe from the Shahada last night of Muslim ibn Aqil alayhi salam. So let's see how your memory is serving you. Ahsant. Baqara as a verb means to split open, to reveal. And so therefore Baqir, like Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, is one who splits open and reveals knowledge that was hidden before, right? Now technically Baqara in a noun means cow, and a Baqir could also mean a cow, a lion, because a lion is somebody that splits his prey, the belly of his prey open. But the correct answer was, as most of you got, was the C. Thank you. Okay, let's go. Next one. Who gave this title, Al-Baqir, to him, right? Oh, sorry, I don't know why I read it like that. Who gave Imam Al-Baqir his title? Was it Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Jabir ibn Abdullah alayhi salam, or Imam Sajjad alayhi salam? I mean, everything comes from Allah, so probably that. The Prophet has given titles to many people, but I mean, it's a little far out of his reach to have mentioned it for the fifth Imam. Jabir was the one who was in direct contact with the fifth Imam, and Imam Sajjad is obviously his dad, right? And a lot of the Imams, if not most of them, got their titles from their fathers. So, Ahsant, most of you have remembered it, that it was Rasulullah who told Jabir, and that was passed down, and then Jabir is the one who gave him the message. And Allah, yeah, I guess from one perspective, you can say Allah told the Prophet to do it, maybe. Sure. So I'll give 7% of you extra, or half points. We'll put it that way. Okay, let's go to the next one. What are the 3 stages of the Imams, alayhimus salams, their system of education? How did they teach people? Was it first that the first four Imams taught Tawheed, the next 4 taught Wilayah, the last 4 taught Ma'ad, or afterlife? Or was it, no, the first 4 Tawheed, next 4 the theory, and the last 4 practice? Or was it usul, then the furu', then the akhlaq, or usul, furu', and practice? So by usul, we mean the fundamentals of the religion. Furu', we mean the kind of tools and skills of how to apply the religion. Akhlaq, obviously, is morality, right? So we know that Tawheed is a fundamental thing, that we see so much of it being discussed in the words of the Prophet, the Imams, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We have his words where he talks about rising for Tawheed, but at the same time, some might say, well, maybe the first 4 were fighting for the Usuluddin first. They didn't talk about the other stuff. Although we have narrations from the first Imam who was talking about fiqh rulings as well. So what are we talking about here? So the theory that we showed was that the Imams, first 4 Imams, their stress was the fundamentals, the usul. Then they focused on the next 4 Imams from 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, taught Quran, Hadith studies, usul al-fiqh, all those major furu' ad-din and how to apply it. And then finally, the practice stage for the last 4 Imams was about how to use this stuff, how to practically apply it when the Imams won't be accessible to us. How do we practice this in the time of ghaiba from the Imams? So very good job to 47% of you. Asant. And last one. Who did the Prophet ﷺ send to Medina to teach the people there for 3 years before he migrated there himself? Was it Imam Ali alayhi salam? Was it his trusted companion Zayd ibn Harith? His other trusted companion Umayr ibn Mus'ab? Or none of the above? Now, obviously we know that for all real tasks, Imam Ali was the one who was sent forward, right? He was sent to go deliver messages. He was sent to collect taxes. He was sent to check on people. So Imam Ali is our go-to guy, right? Then again, Zayd ibn Harith was also a trusted, very well-trusted companion. And he was sent a lot of places as well. He even had gone on some military excursions by himself. Now, many of you may or may not know Umayr ibn Mus'ab. He was also a very, very trusted companion, according to some. Or it's none of these people, right? Could be Abu Bakr, could be Umar, who knows? So, 38% of you are right. It's none of the above. Why? I really threw in a wrench over here. The person that the Prophet sent was Mus'ab ibn Umayr. So I figured let me just throw in that curveball. So the answer is Mus'ab ibn Umayr. That's his name. So good job to 38% of you. All right, let's see the totals. Plato, my man, doing it again at the top. Good job. And the Jaganis, and you all are also doing very well, whichever Jaganis this happens to be. So congratulations to both of you. Each of you, Plato and the Jaganis, you get 1,000,000 points each. And inshallah, you can cash it in on the Day of Judgment. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina. Oh, you got questions? Well, we'll have to wait till next time. We use science on a day-to-day basis. So how do we make sure we are using it in the correct manner? We can talk about this at the beginning of the lecture next week, inshallah. Okay? Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. التماس الدعاء and Eid Mubarak again to all of you.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرزيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة. لم تنجسك جاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الحادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولديك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والأروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن بشرائع الدين وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه، السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناس، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وتابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنتم معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا فضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر، ولقد نافع عن أخي المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، والحقق الله بدرجة آبائكم في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طمعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.